welcome in. Welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got a pretty interesting show for you here today. Getting back to some NFL. Took a break from that for the last couple of days, last couple episodes, I should say, because got into some really interesting, of course, LeBron, Michael Jordan talk, right? But we're going to get back to the NFL. Why? Because the NFL is king, of course. And we're going to talk about fully guaranteed deals, why the NFL is never going to fully embrace them, and two prime reasons why. But before we do that, you know what time it is. If you're here on YouTube and you haven't already, please go ahead, click that subscribe, that like, and that notification bell so you can be notified whenever new content drops on the channel. If you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast. We should come right up. If you're enjoying the content, please, whatever you're listening on, go ahead and give us that thumbs up, so that like, and give us that 5-star review. We really appreciate it. And also leave us a comment, whether it's here on YouTube or your audio podcast platform. All that stuff helps us rise in the algorithm. And make sure also that you share the pod. If you know other people that want to hear good sports talk, maybe from a different perspective and kind of getting away from the way that is discussed on the major mainstream sports channels, well, here it is, Format Podcast. So make sure you share that. You do all these things, you know what happens. Helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. Now let's get right to it. So football, as we know, is an ultra physical game, right? In the United States, football, I was going to say hockey, but hockey's more of a Canadian game, even though the NHL is based in the United States. But still, football is, that's our game, and that's what we call a man's game, right? It is super physical, and even though the NFL is now doing their best to, quote unquote, make the game safer, legislate out as much physicality as they can, the very nature of the game itself being one that's almost fully dependent on imposing your will physically on your opposition, you just can't. You can't legislate out the physicality because of the nature of the game, right? And if you know me from this channel, I'm not the guy that's always, in the proponent of or in the camp of today's athletes are all superior than those of the past, right? Now, if you go back 50 to 100 years, yeah, the athletes are different. I get it. But not in every sport are the athletes all so far superior like a lot of people want to claim in the NBA. Now, in the NFL, I'll give you that, right? It's just a fact. Players are bigger, stronger, and faster for the most part than they've ever been, right? Now, you've always had speedsters. You've always had really strong guys. You've always had guys that were bigger than others, right? Cool. But in the NFL today, on the whole, the guys are bigger, stronger, and faster. And when you combine that with the violent collisions that are constantly taking place, and then, the evidence we now have of CTE and other forms of brain trauma and all those things, well, the NFL is doing what they believe they have to do to try and make the game safer. Now, with that said, and you've also heard me complain about this, that affects the way the statistics go, right? It's easier than ever to put up big numbers, and that's a story for a different day, but you got to take that into account when you're talking about guys being better than they ever were, like the quarterbacks putting up all these passing numbers and the receivers putting up all these receiving numbers, and situations where you can't really hit guys the way you used to, and it's it's a lot freer in terms of what the defense is able to do to the offensive player. But again, that's a different story. So where am I going with all this? Like I mentioned, guys are bigger, stronger, faster for the most part. What does that mean? That means guys are going to get hurt. Players are going to get injured, and that's just part of the game of football, whether it's college, whether it's high school, or whether it's the NFL, the highest level, of course. So because of that, a lot of players are looking to secure their futures, right? Why? Because the average career length of an NFL player is only 3.5 years. So you put your body through all that, you work that hard to get to the greatest football league in the world, and the average career is only 3.5 years. Why? Because of injury and because of this continuing increase in skill level of the players coming in. Cool. And if they could have it their way, they being the players, they'd all get fully guaranteed contracts, again, because of what you put your body through to get to that level. And then once you're there. Now, I totally understand that. And a lot of fans call for that too. Like, one of my boys, he's like a brother to me. We talk about it all the time. And he's so much in the camp of fully guaranteed contracts for the players. Now, I'm not necessarily for that, and we'll get to why, right? So owners are absolutely against fully guaranteed contracts for players in almost every case. as they should be, right? Because the owners run a business. And at the end of the day, even though it's competition, even though it's sports, the NFL is big business. College football is big business, right? And so these guys don't have a long time to play, so they are trying to get maximum compensation for the time that they do have to play. And I totally understand that. So I'm not saying they're wrong for that. Now, with that said, the owners in most cases are against it. Why? Because it would just be bad business to do it, because just about every player sometime in their career, unless they are extremely lucky or extremely durable, suffers some sort of major injury. And if you're giving everybody fully guaranteed contracts, especially with the salary cap the way it is in the NFL and all that stuff, well, you're really hamstringing yourself. And on, now I suppose that would have to change if everybody was getting fully guaranteed deals. But even at the same time, as an owner, what you're losing is the leverage to force players to restructure their deals, and you're paying guys in situations where they likely won't get to the end of the contract for injuries, right? By the numbers. Okay, so now we have some serious examples of why it would be thoroughly bad business to do it, right? So the first is Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. Now, he actually got the fully guaranteed contract, one of the few in the game, right? He got the biggest one ever, $230 million. And when Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam gave Deshaun Watson that deal, the rest of the owners in the league were not happy with that at all, to the point of Jimmy Haslam was pretty much ostracized at the players' meetings, the owners' meetings, following that spring when he gave that deal out, because they knew that where one guy gets it, there will eventually be a press for more and more to get it, and it's going to put pressure on these owners. Now, I wouldn't worry about that too much, because if you're the owners, we know they collude. Let's be real. If you're the owners and you guys come together at your meetings and say, listen, we're not giving anybody else, especially not quarterbacks, these fully guaranteed deals, because it's just too much money. It takes away our leverage, and these guys are getting paid when they probably won't make it through the contract healthy for us to get a proper ROI, return on investment, on those deals, right? So totally get it. But it was... So Deshaun Watson gets the $230 million deal, which, as a side note, was even more crazy with everything that was going on with him personally, being alleged against him with the quote unquote massage scandal in Texas from his time with Houston, right? So before I move on, let me be clear. I am not taking a side at all in that whole deal, the massage gate or whatever you want to call it, right? I've got my own thoughts on that, but I'm not saying that he's guilty or innocent. I'm not taking a side. As far as I'm concerned, this is pretty simple. 2 grand juries in the state of Texas declined to indict a black man. I mean, that ought to tell you something, right? This is Texas. He's black. 2 grand juries didn't indict him. You know, take that how you will. And he settled the civil cases, right? So it's all over, and I couldn't care less, to be honest. And that's probably the last time you'll ever hear me bring up that subject. Only reason I brought it up was to put it in the point of, it's crazy that he was able to get that fully guaranteed deal. I think it was 5 years, $230 million, with all that hanging over his head. Like, that's something that the last thing you would have expected, right? So anyways, he got the bag, right? He got the quote unquote bag, as they like to call it. And the other owners, as I mentioned, were not at all happy with Jimmy Haslam. Now, this, as we knew, led to, another guy who was up for his deal, allegedly looking for a fully guaranteed contract worth more than Deshaun Watson, and that was Lamar Jackson, former unanimous MVP quarterback of the of the Baltimore Ravens. I was about to say the Boston Celtics. Former unanimous MVP quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens, right? An incredible talent. So Steve Bisciotti, as soon as he heard about this, he was adamant. He spoke up about how he was not in favor of the fully guaranteed deal, and you could tell he was adamant that he was not going to give any player on his team a fully guaranteed deal, whether it was his superstar quarterback or not, right? And so Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens had a fairly ugly standoff this past summer because, they tried to franchise him. He didn't sign the franchise tag because, again, it was reported that he wanted a fully guaranteed deal worth more than Deshaun Watson. Now, they put the exclusive franchise tag on him, which means he could go out and seek a trade from another team, or seek a deal from another team, and the Ravens would have the right to match it. And whether the owners colluded or not, we don't know. It's likely, but we don't know that for sure. And nobody was willing to give him the deal that he thought he was worth. Now he comes back to the table, and the Ravens and Lamar were able to work that whole thing out. So he gets a 5-year, $260 million deal with 135 million guaranteed at signing. So now what you need to know about NFL contracts is that's the only number that truly matters, is the amount guaranteed at signing, because that is the amount of money that the owner has to put in escrow to ensure that he has that money and that the player will get it all. So the amount guaranteed at signing, that's the fully guaranteed money, and that player will see every cent of that, right? Now, the total guarantees that has like roster bonuses and stuff like that, which Lamar will make, is $185 million. So chances are Lamar Jackson is going to see $185 million of the $260 million contract over 5 years. And of course, there's other incentives and stuff in there. And he got a $72.5 million signing bonus that he gets at time of signing. So Lamar ended up getting his deal, compensated very handsomely, but he didn't get the fully guaranteed deal. Now, especially with a player like him who's uber mobile. Now, he hasn't really been injured a whole lot in his career, but he's uber mobile, and that lends to a player more likely, especially at the quarterback position, being injured, okay? So Bisciotti made it clear he wasn't going to get a fully guaranteed deal. We know why. Deshaun Watson got that deal, and guess what? Deshaun Watson is now out for the season, okay? He's been injured. He's out for the season. The Browns are on the hook for every penny. Even if it doesn't work out, you have no leverage to force a restructure or to change around the contract. And if you're Deshaun Watson, why would you, right? You got all that money. You're going to make sure you get it all. So this is why the majority of owners are not doing this, right? Now, let's talk about the second quarterback, who is the major reason that we're not really going to see these fully guaranteed deals. Now, Joe Burrow is, by most accounts, the second best quarterback in the league. Most people think so. And he's a guy that, since he's come in the league, really since he was in college at LSU, he led one of the most prolific offenses in history. First team, I believe, to go 15-0. They won the national championship. He won the Heisman. He was just out of this world at LSU, him and Jamar Chase, who is now his teammate in Cincinnati, coincidentally. And so they went bonkers. They won the national title, all that. Great. Joe Burrow comes into the league and starts getting busy, right? So this is a guy who has a career win-loss record of 24-17-1 with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, that doesn't sound all that impressive, but the Cincinnati Bengals are a traditionally moribund franchise, right? Before he got there, they hadn't won a playoff game in, I want to say, since 1988, I believe, when they made their run to the Super Bowl. So it's just a bad franchise, bad from the top to the bottom in most cases, right? The ownership was terrible, extremely cheap. It's Mike Brown, just not good, right? And so Joe Burrow came there and he turned life around. And Mike Brown, who the stories about him being cheap are legendary, from locking up Gatorade and trying to give players used jock straps to wear. And this is not my opinion. This is something that was, told by former Bengals wide receiver TJ Houshmandzadeh. He actually talked about this. I've heard him tell this story about how Mike Brown basically brought in a bunch of used jock straps and tried to give it to the players to use. Like, how disgusting is that? You're supposed to be a billionaire. You own an NFL franchise. Like, cut it out. Stop being cheap. It's not like you're not getting now you're getting like $300 million every year from revenue sharing. You're just being cheap. And that's terrible, because these players are an investment, right? That's like not wanting to change the oil on a freaking Lamborghini, right? But anyway, so Joe Burrow comes in, and I know Mike Brown was like, man, I love all this extra money he's making me in terms of deep playoff runs and putting all these butts in seats and selling all this swag and all this stuff, all this merch. But damn, I'm going to have to pay him, because he's got a history of not wanting to pay guys. And that's just what it is, right? Now, Joe Burrow, in his, his fourth year in the league, he's already won 5 playoff games. He's been to the AFC Championship game twice. He's been to the Super Bowl once, and literally been within 1 minute of winning the Super Bowl a couple of years back when the Rams won, right? And why did they not win there? Because Mike Brown, again, didn't want to pay for elite O-line play, and Aaron Donald wrecked the game at the end, as Aaron Donald will do, because he's an all-time great player who's going to be a Hall of Fame defensive lineman. But the point is, he hasn't wanted to, he being Mike Brown, owner of the Bengals, spend the money to protect Joe Burrow. Now, Why am I bringing up Joe Burrow and giving you all that backstory and context? Why? Because Joe Burrow just signed a new deal this past offseason. And again, he earned it. I'm not the guy that's going to tell you that he didn't earn it. I wanted him to get his money. However, in a minute, I'll tell you why that might be worrisome. So Joe Burrow, being that he's up next, and I've told you before, I don't like this NFL thing of whoever's up next should get the most money, but it is what it is because Joe Burrow does actually deserve this. 5 years, $275 million total, $40 million signing bonus, average salary $55 million, $146,510 guaranteed at signing, $219 million in total guarantees. Okay. And then, of course, you got the extra bonuses mixed in. Cool. So a lot of money, right? And again, $146,510,000 guaranteed at signing. That's the fully guaranteed money. That's the real money. And of course, the $40 million signing bonus. So he got that right away. So Joe Burrow, he's set for life, even if he doesn't see all that money. But why am I bringing this up? Because Joe Burrow and the Bengals played division rival Baltimore Ravens last Thursday night. And guess what? He got hurt and he's out for the year. This is the second time in his 4-year career that he's not going to finish the season. And that pretty much kills the Bengals season. And it sucks for them. It really does. And you have to wonder, what does the future look like for Cincinnati, especially knowing that they gave Joe Burrow all that money and it's completely going to change the complexion of the team going forward once that contract kicked in, because now it affects the salary cap and you have to figure out how you're going to pay the other guys you got to pay, right? You got T. Higgins, who may end up on the street or going to another team. Jamar Chase is going to have to get paid, right? He's probably going to end up being the top paid wide receiver in the league, right? You still have to try and figure out the offensive line to protect this guy. Like, unless you have some salary cap wizard who is a master, or you have players who are willing to rework their deals, whether it's take less or rework their deals and restructure it and put stuff into bonus structure. And now, of course, that's if Mike Brown is willing to pay that, right? So if you will put stuff into bonuses, that doesn't hurt the cap and you can rearrange the money. But if you put it in bonus, that money has to go in escrow, and you got to pay them guys that part of the money up front. And as we mentioned, Mike Burrow's super cheap. He may not want to do it. So here's the deal, right? The big question is this, and it's going to sound absurd given what Joe Burrow's done in his career. Remember, I told you in 4 years, he already has 5 playoff wins and literally has been within 1 minute of winning the Super Bowl. Quick note, Dak Prescott only has 2 in 8 years in the league. But, nobody's going to be crazy and try to say that Dak Prescott is as good or better than Joe Burrow. But I just wanted to throw that out there because, I love taking a shot at Dak Prescott. But anyway, here's the big question. Is Joe Burrow injury prone? And should the Bengals have paid someone all that money who doesn't look like they can stay on the field? Again, I know that sounds absolutely absurd based on what Joe Burrow has done in his career and how he has turned this franchise around and how he literally saved Zach Taylor's job. I think Zach Taylor was like 6-24 before he got Joe Burrow. He was absolutely terrible. So Joe Burrow is clearly the linchpin of this franchise, right? But should they have paid him? I mean, I think it's fair to say he's injury prone, but and I know you got to pay him based on what he's done, but they always talk about in the NFL, you don't pay a guy for what he's done, you pay a guy for what he's going to do going forward. And if Joe Burrow is a guy who can't consistently be on the field for you, now when he's on the field, he is right there, number 2 behind Patrick Mahomes in terms of best of the best in this game, right? But if you can't count on him being on the field, was it worth it to give this guy $146 million fully guaranteed? I don't know. I can't answer that. But for those of you who might be arguing he's not injury prone, let's go back and look at this thing, okay? We'll take it all the way back to college, all right? In August of 2017, he had a hand-wrist fracture, okay? So he hurt his throwing hand and broke a bone in it during practice and had an operation. This is when he was still at Ohio State before he had even moved on to LSU. Okay, so that's one injury. Next one, he had a chest and rib fracture in 2020 at LSU, right? During his redshirt senior season, Burrow sustained torn rib cartilage after being hit by Clemson linebacker James Skalski near the end of the second quarter. Okay, now he finished the game, threw for 463 yards and 5 touchdowns. So that was incredible. They won the national championship. Great. But the point is, That's another major injury right there. Okay, he comes into the league November of 2020. He tears his knee up, right? He only made it to week 11 of his rookie season before he tore his knee up, and he literally tore it up, right? Because he had an ACL tear, grade 3, MCL tear, grade 3, PCL tear, grade 3, and tore the meniscus. So basically, all the ligaments that hold your knee together, he tore all that up. Okay, so that's bad. Now, he had the operation, he did his rehab, and came back the following year. Okay, so December 2021, he dislocates a finger on his hand. He dislocated his pinky finger after being sacked during the game. Now, he didn't miss any games with that, but that's just another injury, right? Okay. January 2022, this is last year. Week 17 win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Burrow strained his knee after twisting it towards the end of the game. So he limped out and he missed the regular season finale in the game, but he came back for the playoff run, right? And he went to he took the team to the AFC Championship game, came up just short. Cool. All right. February 2022, MCL sprain grade 2. So another knee injury. Okay. July 27, 2023, he strains his calf. That's this past offseason in training camp. He strains his calf. And, you know, we saw remnants of that when the season started. Okay. November 2023, he tears, that's last week, November 16th against the Ravens. He tears a ligament in his throwing wrist, and he's out for the rest of the year, and he'll have to have surgery. Okay. The injury occurred in the second quarter when Burrow said he felt a pop after throwing a 4-yard touchdown pass to running back Joe Mixon. So I bring all this up not at all to take shots at Joe Burrow, because I'm a Joe Burrow fan. I think the guy is amazing. And as we said, I think most people would have him as the second best quarterback in the league. And I think he's awesome. But the question is, paying a guy all that money who you're not sure can stay on the field, like, is that the smartest move? I mean, I guess you have to do it with a player of that caliber, but it sucks. And this is yet another example of why I don't believe the NFL is ever going to fully endorse or fully embrace fully guaranteed contracts. It just doesn't make sense. Now, here's another part of this real quick before I get out of here. I always talk about how these quarterbacks and receivers are putting up these crazy numbers now, and a big part of it is because of the way the rules are. You can't hit quarterbacks, you can barely hit receivers, and all that. Now, with two of the best quarterbacks in the league, or two of the guys who at one time or another during their careers have been top 5 quarterbacks in the league, you wonder, are they being the league going to try and institute even more rules to protect the quarterbacks? Like, I don't know how much more you can do. We get it. The quarterback is a glamour position. We get it. The game is different when the elite quarterbacks are hurt and can't be in there, but it's still a physical game, and guys are going to come get you. I mean, are they going to make it so you two-hand touch the quarterback? Are you just going to lightly pull them down and they're in the grass? Like, I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do, but we know that, especially now with the gambling influence in the sport, this is going to be really, really serious, because they want all these teams to be at the best they can possibly be, you know, for the maximum amount of time. And that means having the elite quarterbacks play as much as they possibly can. So, yeah, I just wanted to come on here and talk about this. Why don't you give me your thoughts? I want to know from you. Do you think that the NFL will ever embrace fully guaranteed contracts, and do you think they should? Leave your comments in the comment section. Can't wait to hear from you, and I'll be back on the next episode. And I'm out. Peace.